Hi, everyone. Again,
Hello,
we
everybody.
are talking about the challenges in the production and supply chain now. And yeah, there is a lot of problems there, especially by facing the textile sector. It's one of the biggest industries that we have, and it has a lot of and a long supply chain, and this supply chain is of course also influenced by Corona. So it is still so important to talk about, this huge topics and to see what we can actually do through, of course, these problems that we have. With Cradle to Cradle, we are talking about biological and technical cycles on in textiles, and so of course we have speakers here who are really the ones who are into this field, and we have the specialists for the biological cycles and for the technical cycles. Let me shortly introduce my panelists. We have Ulf Jaeckel here. He is head of sustainable consumption and product-related environmental protection in the Federal Ministry for the Environment and co-lead from the UN Program for Consumer Information and Sustainability. Thank you that you're here and joining our discussion today. Then we have Simone Cipriani. He is the head and founder of the Ethical Fashion Initiative and chairman of the UN Alliance for Sustainable Fashion. Thank you that you are here as well.
Thank you for having me.
And we have Rob Kracht, CSR Communications and Training Manager from Jaeckel, a company who is working with Cradle to Cradle for many years now and is working in the field of flooring, but also acquired the company Deso in 2015 and is working with Cradle to Cradle since 2008 already. And the company Deso is also working with fibers, and Jaeckel is working with fibers in a technical way. So this is also an interesting perspective. Thank you that you're here as well.
You're welcome.
And last but not least at all, we have Patrik Lundström. He is the CEO and founder of Renewcell, a company that is doing recycling of cellulosic-based textiles such as cotton and viscose, and is working with partners like H&M and working on the field of how they can really close the loop in the textiles textiles industry. Thank you for being here as well.
Thank you for having me.
So today we wanted to talk about the problems we have, and the problems we are facing. We already heard the State Secretary and heard that there are, of course, especially in this field of textiles, a lot of problems also during the Corona crisis. Maybe to start with, Ulf Jaeckel, maybe you can maybe explain us a bit the perspective of the Federal Ministry from the Environment, how the circular economy and the circular economy laws play a role in the textiles industry. Okay.
Connection is lost.
He's the one we can't hear. So then maybe let's just go over to Simone Cipriani, because he's also with the UN Alliance for Sustainable Fashion. And maybe you can start with stating some of the most problems you see in the textile sector and what kind of political frameworks you would think we would need for that.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Ulf is back.
Thank you.
With you first, and then I go back to Ulf again.
Okay. It's me first?
No, let's then stay in our route, and Simone is starting.
Ah, sorry. Okay. Okay. Sorry, Ulf. So we are, the Ethical Fashion Initiative is like a giant supply chain. We make fabric, we make some garments, we make jewels, we make accessories, shoes, and all the rest. And we make it in very marginalized communities in Africa, in Afghanistan, and we are suppliers for some of the biggest names of the fashion industry. By the way, I hear an echo. Do you hear it? Is this better?
I think everyone is hearing you well from the
Okay,
conference.
maybe this is better. Okay. Without the mic, it is better without an echo. So what we do is really managing a supply chain. Then we also have an accelerator that accelerates new design fashion businesses in Africa. And that's another line of work. For what matters today, for the meeting of today, what matters is this work of producers, because we are in the supply chain of some of the biggest fashion groups in the world, from Europe to the US, to Japan, to Australia. So from our point of view, and then from the point of view of the UN Alliance of Sustainable Fashion, that joins together all the UN agencies that have to do with sustainable fashion, from our observatory, this COVID crisis has accelerated change which was already on the move. First of all, courts online, this and that, digital, artificial reality, digital business, and all the rest, digital fashion week, this and that, but also a drive towards sustainability. We are very far as an industry from being sustainable. Our idea of sustainability is a holistic idea which is based on the Sustainable Development Goals, on the Paris Agreement. And as it is a holistic view, we bring together social sustainability and environmental sustainability. What we have seen as suppliers in COVID is a new push for environmental sustainability. More of our buyers, new buyers, come to us in the fashion industry asking us to work on two issues. One, decarbonizing the supply chain.
Simone, I don't want to stop you, but just please, maybe you use your headphones again, because it's better to hear you than from...
Okay. Okay.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
People are not understanding you that well.
Sorry. Mamma mia. There I am. Do you hear me again? Here I am.
Great, much better.
So the two things that are asking us are the decarbonization of the supply chain and circularity. Over the years, we have organized ourselves to be climate neutral. So we are now, for the first time, seriously seen as suppliers as a factor that reduces the carbon intensity of the supply chains of our buyers, of our customers. And it's the first time. I remember when we started having this kind of conversations years ago in the industry, I remember the manager of a big fashion group told me squarely, it doesn't work like that. The business model is another. And when I told him, hey, this is going to change, it's not sustainable, the guy said, yes, but we wait for the change to come, and then we adapt. So this is what the industry is trying to do now. not to radically change the business model, but to put some elements of sustainability in it. But this is untenable. You cannot really decarbonize the supply chains and the whole value chain up to retail, and you cannot go towards a higher rate of circularity, a reduced intensity, material intensity of the supply chain if you do not change the business model. So we are in a historical moment in which this industry, for the first time, is seriously thinking about this. We see this as suppliers, I repeat. We are requested to work with them on these points. An example, cotton. We make cotton fabric. We work in Western Africa on this. In one of the places where we work, in Burkina Faso, we work from the farmer up to the fabric. We use organic cotton. We do manual spinning. We use organic dyes. And then we do manual weaving. In the only points in which we do not do manual spinning and we use machines, we are now installing renewables, solar panels, to power these machines. So this is a supply chain which is radically decarbonized. Some of our customers are now, for the first time, using this to reduce their carbon intensity, to the point that we are also organizing ourselves to measure this effort of decarbonization, to have a transparent accounting system for this, because there are accounting systems for carbon intensity and decarbonization and all that, and then to sell also carbon credits, because this is what we are also producing. Then you have to fight with the business model that is still a bit reluctant. In this example of cotton, one of our biggest buyers is telling me, hey, sell me only the thread, only the yarn, the cotton yarn, because I'll do the weaving on my own and I'll do that. No, sustainability is a holistic approach. We need value addition. We need the weaving to generate the kind of revenue that we need to implement more and more of these green systems of production. This is what I see from our observatory. In the wider UN scenario, more and more agencies are moving towards that. UNEP, the environmental agency of the UN, has created a very effective platform for circularity. And we are in the UN decade of ecosystem restoration. It starts now in 2021. And this is supported by UNEP and FAO. The ILO is now revising all their standards to be even more effective in the drive of having decent work conditions. And I close with one point. Whatever effort towards decarbonization and towards circularity is also a huge drive towards many, many SDGs. I'll just give you an idea. SDG 4, quality education. SDG 8, decent work and economic growth. SDG 9, industry, innovation, infrastructure. SDG 11, sustainable cities. SDG 12, sustainable consumption. Many more SDGs, more than those specifically on the environment, are involved in this. Tackling decarbonization and circularity is a huge drive towards the SDGs and, of course, towards the Paris target, because this industry still needs to do a lot to be on the Paris pathway. Sorry, I spoke too much.
Thank you very much for thank you very much for your perspective. I think this was a good start for this conversation. Maybe now we can go over back to Jaeckel and hear the perspective of the federal perspective and how this is actually implemented in the laws in Germany.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Simone, for presentation of the situation as it stands now. It's a huge environmental impact by the textile industry, and there's a situation that it was let it run for quite a while. Sorry, I have to at least change a bit of my mics here. I hear myself more than anything else. The situation is that it's a global problem. Yes, we can do something on the national level, but it's very difficult to reach out on the whole textile chain. We have tried to address it with the Textile Alliance we have, and their companies work on a voluntary basis for getting the supply chain in order, in particular in the social side of it. But still, there is a lot to do on the environmental side, and of course, there is the need for rising the level playing field so that companies doing something on sustainability are rewarded also by the market. And let me just change my thing here. Can you still hear me? Yes? Okay. Sorry, it's better for me now. We have to address the whole supply chain. And of course, we have to first do it on the European level. That's where we can do legislation. The European Commission is planning, and we are very much supporting that, a strategy on textiles by the end of the year that will cover quite likely the whole value chain, and will address the issue of fast fashion, up to 52 new collections a year, and so on, and the whole business model in the field of textiles. It's as Simone pointed out, it's a very unsustainable one, and there is more or less no real legislation on that so far, on the global level, but also on the European level. And the European Commission and the European member states are willing to change that, also because of the high environmental impacts and high social impacts of the value chain. There are many points in the supply chain to be addressed, from the sourcing and the fibers. What kind of fibers? Is it still cotton? Is it plastic fibers, or are there other fibers which can be taken up? We are, for example, also looking into wood-based fibers. We have commissioned a study on the environmental assessment of these wood-based fibers, including circularity aspects, of course. If there is a chance to replace some of the very impactful fibers like cotton, for example. There is the production process, which often has environmental problems in the countries produced. And of course, there is also, when it comes to the retailers and the markets where the textiles are sold, there is the problem which we also face of the pandemic, that if you have too many collections a year, then you get a stock which you don't sell. And how how to address that the textiles produced are not burned, which is at least to a certain extent still something which is done. From the pandemic now, there is a much bigger problem because people haven't bought clothing for quite a while. They couldn't buy it in the stores. They could do it online, but they haven't done it to the certain extent. And therefore, we have introduced a law in Germany, the so-called Obhutspflicht, which means that you have to take care of the products, not only textiles, but of the products you are selling and which are in your stock, and you don't have to let them go to waste. You have to take care of them, and you have to report on what you have done with that. This legislation have been introduced in our new circular economy law, and there are still some ordinances left to be adopted by the cabinet to have the full effect of this legislation, but that is on the way. So we try to take care of that as well. So
how will you take care of that?
And then we also look into the business models. I mean, the whole textile supply chain runs on a business model which is living on ever faster, ever more textiles, and that people buy more and more textiles. We want to increase durability. We want to increase recyclability, repairability of textiles. This is also a process which is in the beginning. There is waste management legislation where there is a separate collection needed in the European Union in the future. That will happen, but what to do with the textiles? And I'm not the expert, and the colleagues on the panel may correct me or go deeper into the issue, but to my knowledge, when there is a mixed fiber, then it's very hard to recycle. And so recyclability should also be part of the requirements when having textiles on the market. How to do that and how to integrate that in the strategy I mentioned in the European Union, we will see. But these are more or less the plans we have on, and the legislation we have so far to address the textile industry beyond voluntary approaches. Of course, we have voluntary approaches like the Green Button or the Blue Angel or other labels where we have criteria which are quite ambitious and where we want to see progress for the front runners. And we have, when it comes to public procurement, we have a target for the federal level in Germany to procure 50% of sustainable textiles until the end of last year. We didn't meet that, but we have now made up a roadmap on how to get there pretty soon. So I leave it for that. Thank you. And sorry for the technical problems.
Thank you very much as well. I think that we could also hear from this that business models are really important, and to see how we can actually frame this differently and how we can start with the design. I think this is something that we always have to see when we are talking about cradle to cradle. How can we actually figure out a design that is made for circularity and that is made for actually taking these bags, because otherwise we will have all these problems at the end. Maybe Rob Kracht can tell us a bit more about their design on their fibers and how they are actually recycling their technical fibers. and their technical materials, because they are the ones who actually using cradle to cradle for.
Maybe we should talk to each other. I don't know.
For many years
so
now.
What do you think? Is that correct with the recycling of fibers? That when there's a mixed fiber, that's pretty difficult.
Can you hear me now, or can't you? Yeah, I wanted to ask Rob if he could maybe tell us, because they are actually the ones who are recycling a lot of their fibers, and they are recycling them privately and not with a public or a third-party company. So maybe you can tell us what you're doing at Tarkett and Desso.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I realize that if you mute yourself, then the echo is gone. So, do you understand? But okay, maybe it's good now, but I can mute you, by the way. But yeah, I'll just focus on Desso, because Desso is the company that is now owned by Tarkett, but we really started with a textile product, the carpet tile, and the carpet tile is the most used product in commercial flooring. And although Michael Braungart really challenged us to see if we could produce a carpet tile in the biological cycle, it's not possible. That we're in the technical cycle with this product, and we really had to redesign the product so that it was not only possible to separate it, but also we had to look at the materials, because as cradle to cradle, you want to start with healthy and clean materials. We also still use other fibers for other products, woolen fibers, but in the carpet industry, wool is always combined with polyamide. And then it's impossible, like already was said, it's impossible to recycle. You cannot separate the polyamide from the wool. So fortunately, we were able to change the backing, because that was something that Michael Braungart pointed out. Firstly, we had to change the backing to make it recyclable in a safe way. And then the yarns in this industry are all polyamide 6. And we have a partner in Aquafil. Mr. Giulio Bonacci from Aquafil is a hero in the textile industry, I think. He is able to depolymerize polyamide 6 yarns. So by using these yarns, by using polyamide 6 yarns, we can assure that after we've been able to separate the product after its useful life into backing material and yarn, the company of Aquafil can then depolymerize the yarns and produce new yarns from it. So I always say cradle to cradle is something you cannot do alone. You always have to do it with partners. And in this case, Aquafil is a great partner, because he realizes together with us the circularity of these products. And there is another producer of yarns that uses polyamide 6,6. This means you have 2 carbon chains in the polyamide, and that unfortunately is unable to depolymerize. So you can't recycle this. You can't make this circular. So we had to look at yarn manufacturers who only use polyamide 6. So if you look at the supply chain, it really, you have to choose suppliers that work in the same way, so that in the end you can produce products that actually can be recycled, as we are doing right now.
Yeah, great. But where do you get your virgin material from then? Because maybe not all of your material is recycled yet, yeah?
No, absolutely not. No, it is. Most of the yarn is coming from Aquafil, and Aquafil is using waste materials in polyamide 6, not just carpet yarns, because they're not enough yet. They use all kinds of waste material. So most of the yarn, it's called econil yarn, most of the yarn that we use in our products is already recycled. The backing is a different situation. The backing is a polyolefin. It's not PVC, and it's certainly not bitumen. It's a polyolefin. So we buy this from the oil companies that produce polyolefin. But being a cradle company, we have to make sure that the polyolefin used is 100% safe. So it is still very challenging to not just design the product, but also produce products that are 100% recyclable. I always say within Cradle, it's not just about recycled content, as you know better than I do, but it is also about recyclable content. Our raw materials have to be 100% safe. So the virgin materials that we buy also have to be suitable for this Cradle circular process.
Thank you. Patrik Lundström, you are probably the one who can give us the other perspective of the recycling process and also tell us a bit more about this process of actually having different mixed fibers and recycling them, because you're the one with your company who are actually recycling a lot of cotton and cellulose-based fibers.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, that's correct. I mean, we are what we do is we are making a dissolving pulp, and that dissolving pulp is then being used to make a viscose fiber. But in order to make dissolving pulp, you normally use tree wood. In our process, we use 100% recycled cellulosic materials, so in the largest extent than cotton-based materials. And what's the beauty of this process is that we actually create a mechanism for the fashion industry to become circular, 100% circular. So we don't use any virgin materials like wood or so. We take textiles that has once been used, so your old jeans, my old jeans, we put them into our process, and we make then dissolving pulp is then being made into new viscose fibers and then being used for new clothes and so forth. In that way, we create a circularity in the textile industry. And to your question here is, what does this mean when it comes to raw material? And some of my colleagues here have already touched upon it, the importance of design for circularity. While we're talking about this, we get a lot of interest from the largest brands in the world. So apart from H&M, we've also launched with Levi's, for example, and others. But we also talk about the importance of creation when designers, product designers, and in our case, it's fashion designers, to think about what they use in their designs. Because design for circularity is really important to create a material that can be recycled. Textiles today are consisting of a lot of different fibers. The majority of the fibers are polyesters. It's about 50% of the fiber market, and then you have cotton, which is about 25%, and then you have approximately I would say 10 to 15%, which is viscose, and then some other fibers. But if you look at that, both cotton is extremely wasteful and is using a lot of water, and in some places in the world, rain and so forth is something that you have abundance of. However, in the majority of the world, water is a scarce resource, and especially clean water. And here we are using clean water and also fertilizers and pesticides in order to grow cotton. And cotton is today grown in large monocultures, which then are using, you need to use a lot of pesticides because it's attracting, of course, insects and germs and so forth. When it comes to polyesters, it's a pumping up of oil, and then we're using it once throughout the value chain, and then we burn it. So what we also talk about within Renewcell is what we call the concept of saving the molecule. And I think that's a central concept when it comes to circularity, to save the molecules. I mean, we also had heard Rob how they are using the polymers, the polyamides, and they're recycling them. And you create, and that's the only way, in my mind, that we can create a sustainable world. We need to use what we once have already grown or pumped or taken out of the world of the earth crust. We cannot just keep on pumping and growing over and over again, and then just put it on landfill or burn it as it is today. So this concept of saving the molecules, I think, is a central one in circularity. That said, we also have a growing population in the world, in the middle class, I would say. I mean, we're going from, the projection is that we're going from 3.7 billion people in middle class now, 2020, to about 5.4 billion people in 2030. That's 1.7 billion people coming into middle class during this decade. I find that number is amazing. I mean, we're lifting people out of poverty into middle class. However, they also are entitled and want to clothe themselves exactly like we do. They want to have several pair of t-shirts, several pair of jeans, and we have a moral obligation to create circular systems that they can also have that. But we also need to, of course, we need to use less. We need to use longer. We need to amend and so forth, let's say reuse clothes, but we also need to recycle. So all those concepts need to work in tandem when it comes to all products that we are developing. You know, during this decade, we're going to go from 110 million tons of textile fiber in the world up to 160 million tons. That's 50 million tons more of textile fiber, and the majority of that will come from polyester. So, and polyester, unfortunately, can only use it once throughout the value chain as it's being colored in clothes. And when you hear about recycled polyesters, it's normally not recycled clothes, it's recycled polyethylene bottles. So it's actually just giving one more life in there. But there is also very positive news also from the EU, from the UN, from Germany, from France, where we see that, let's say, the governmental bodies want to, that we collect and recycle textile in the same way as we do with cans, bottles, glass, and so forth. And that will create a huge opportunity for recycling, but the technologies are lacking. And here, one of the solutions, and I'm hoping for many more, is what we are doing at Renewcell. We are creating that circularity when it comes to cellulosic fibers. And that's probably also why we get such a high interest from the fashion industry. The largest fashion brands in the world, they keep on calling on us, a small company, today small, but we are investing in order to become big, that they want to run their collections on our materials. And of course, we're very grateful for that. But if you look at the growth, as I mentioned, it's about 50 million tons more of textile fibers coming in during this decade. And I'm not able to build 50 million tons of capacity in one decade. So here alone, and here there is huge opportunities for companies like ours and others, and collaborations and so forth, and maybe even support from governmental bodies in order to grow this circularity in the fastest possible way. What I see is that there are a lot of great technologies out there that can do this. But we also we need to scale them, and to scale for circularity and for sustainable products that require investments in hardware. So it's very different from what the investment in, let's say, the investors are used to when it comes to IT and maybe ongoing businesses and so forth. These are new companies coming in that need to put steel in the ground. And here we also have, you know, this with support from governments, but and from other organizations to ensure that we have fast, let's say, approvals on environmental permits and so forth. Because every year, every month that we are missing is we're losing out. 10 years to I call this the decade of change. And 10 years is a rather short time to change an industry. So it's extremely important that we move fast. And I'm not saying that we as a company need to move fast, but all of us need to move fast. And we need to move away from ideas into action. And I think that is the most important factor that we need to realize today, that technologies are there, the scalability is not there, and we have the opinion of the public, governments, people who actually buy clothes and so forth. They want to have sustainability. What we're lacking today is scale. And here I think we need to work very much in tandem in all different sectors to support that. Otherwise, we will come through this decade again with limited action, and that's what worries me the most.
Thank you. I think from a cradle-to-cradle perspective, of course, when we look at the PET textiles, then we see that, like we heard in the talk at the beginning, that of course not only the problem that we are not actually recycling it at the end, but also that we can find all these fibers and the particles of the fibers in our aquatic systems, for example, and they are not made for the biosphere, but they will get there. So of course they have to be designed. Textile has to be designed differently when it comes to a part where it goes into the ecosphere, for example. So my question back to you would be, how, regarding to the design, how would you actually think of, or how much waste is still produced in this recycling process through to poor design at the beginning and materials that you cannot use again because they are not made for being used again?
Okay, so what you're saying is, like I said, mixed fibers, polycotton and so forth.
No, but also with your cotton, there's colors and all kind of additional stuff on there. It's not pure cotton that you're getting to recycle.
That's correct. We can, when it comes to cotton, we can use all cotton. If you have a pair of jeans, for example, which is more or less normally only cotton, if it is colored, if it has some materials on it and so forth, we can use it. The problem is when you start mixing in, for example, elastan into cotton, then it's becoming very difficult because elastan is within the fiber and you need to separate that. So the more, let's say, the worse, the more the fibers are blended in different types of materials, that makes it difficult. If you take a blend of cellulosic materials, for example, viscose and cotton, that can be used. But if you take any type of let's say, olefins, polyesters, elastans, and so forth, then it's becoming very difficult. Today, we have a plan to be able to take in materials that has an average of 90% purity. That means that we can buy, let's say, jeans, which normally has 97, 98%, and mix that with 80%. But we don't go lower than 90% in average. And the reason is that there is so much clothes available out there that we just don't have to. So it creates a huge problem with mixing of fibers. And when we have been discussing with Levi's, they have really designed for circularity. They just launched under their sub-brand, Well Threaded, a pair of jeans that they call their most sustainable jeans ever. And you know, that is just the beginning of what we need to do when it comes to launching sustainable clothes. But if you take, for example, this dress here, that has been launched by H&M, and that is 50% normal viscose and 50% circulose viscose. And this one we can recycle as well. So what we need to do is to design for circularity, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult. The problem I see is that when it comes to olefins, once you have colored olefins, then it's becoming very difficult to recycle them again. And here I don't know how actually to solve that problem. That is an issue. But if you take, let's say, 25% of the fibers, we could replace a lot of also let's say the polyesters, we could also replace, for example, in sports goods, sweaters and t-shirts and so forth, and shorts are normally made out of polyester today. They can be used, they can be made in circulose, and that is probably 10 to 15 to 20% of that's of the polyester sector as well. So functional clothes can in many cases also be moved into other fibers. So there's a huge growth opportunity here, but we need to find that design for circularity. And one last point I'd like to make, and that is, you mentioned a very important thing, and that is about the microfibers of polyesters and so forth being flushed out into the seas. By 2050, some people say that we're going to have more plastic than fish in the sea. So here we need to do something about that as well. And here I think that we could actually switch over to other type of materials for a majority of the polyesters. However, some functional materials are not possible to do yet. But we have a huge opportunity to create a completely circular fashion industry.
Thank you. Talking about design and these perspectives, Ulf Jaeckel, what would you say is the pathway, for example, for prominent environmental labels like the Blaue Engel or the Grüne Knopf, green button, that are like the most important environmental labels used in Germany? And how is this idea of design and the perspective designing for cradle to cradle and designing for circularity, that you can really use these materials back again? How is this implemented, or what is the pathway for that?
Yes, this is mainly not incorporated so far.
Yeah, that's a problem.
That's why we are looking into the issue of new fibers. We are also looking into the issue of pure textiles, pure clothing with one, or at least with just an addition of a second material in a very small share. That is to be taken up. We are revising at the moment the criteria set for the Blue Angel in that regard, and the green button criteria set is also revised at the moment. It's not coming from one day to the other, and so it needs consultation. What is needed, what is possible, what is preferable, and talking to stakeholders on that, because we want we also want the acceptance by the business sector. Both are voluntary labels, and both rely to a certain extent on the business that is taken up. It's taken up, in particular the green button, already to a higher extent. We want to give a push by our own procurement. And when we talk about the federal level, where we have this target of 50%, we also talk about, for example, the army or the police and so on. So it's not small what we are procuring in terms of textiles. The Ministry of Environment is not the biggest procurement office to buy textiles, that's for sure, but others are, the Ministry for Interior, for example, or Defense. So we are trying to give that a push, and we are trying to also include that in our assessment of standards and for example, for textiles. We are doing that assessment via a website called Siegelklarheit, where we assess as a government, as a federal level, the quality and the ambition of labels and standards. And we recommend some standards also to the to the public procurement offices, and these are then regarded as the sustainable textiles when they meet the standards which are recommended there. So it's a system we have built up, and we are still refining that. Also the criteria set and looking into the issue of circularity more than we did in the past. That's on the way, but we haven't finished that. We are not there yet.
But why is it still a discussion on responsibility and the perspective where can we get, but not actually a discussion on how can we actually, why is not the one who is actually producing all these problems paying for them? It's always like that we are, as society, are paying for the costs, and only a company is making money with it. But actually, why are we not including these costs into the products or into what actually the company is selling? Simone wanted to say something.
Yes, absolutely. That's a very good point. The logic of, do you hear me? You hear me? The logic of carbon accounting and also the logic of circularity is getting the polluter to pay. Carbon credits are based on that. The issue is that in the business model of the industry and in finance, those costs are not accounted for. It's about having a different accounting system that takes into consideration also the internal carbon pricing, the material intensity, and therefore the prices associated to that, the general externalities associated to that. If we have these, we have a new way also to evaluate the investments inside the big group, inside the big company, because the returns are also evaluated, taking into account costs that are usually not accounted for. This is extremely important, extremely important, the issue of costing. And this is part of the more general issue, which is that in the next 10, 20 years, we are undergoing a general revolution in the way in which we produce and consume things, which is as big as the Industrial Revolution. But the Industrial Revolution happened over a time span of 100 years. This has to happen in 10, 20 years only. So it's a huge technology drive, and it's a huge experiment in the history of the humankind. And this issue of the pricing, of putting the right pricing on things and on getting polluters to pay is the starting point for that. Legislation in this is absolutely important. I remember that in the fashion industry, the first time we started speaking about environmental responsibility was when Germany issued the Topfer decree in the early 90s. And from one day to the other, we were all producers. I was a producer in Italy of shoes. We had to start taking care about packaging. It was the first time in this industry. Before, who cares about environmental sustainability? But in that moment, Germany forced the fashion world to do that. We are in the same situation. And what we have to focus on today is 2 or 3 key things. One is get a transparent accounting system for carbon, for decarbonization. It exists, it's possible. Communicate this transparently, because there is a lot of cheating around. In setting, reduce your own emissions, because offsetting is a short-term solution, which is important now, but in the long term, communicate, assess, measure your capacity to really reduce the carbon intensity of your, directly reduce the carbon intensity of your supply chain. And the same applies to what the other speakers have said about circularity. The material intensity of that because this is about getting out of the linear consumption model, no, and getting into another paradigm. But this has to be accounted for also in finance and in the way in which you generate value and in which you evaluate the value of the future cash flows that you are going to generate. We are in this, but no, I'm not going to speak this. We are in a carbon bubble, in a certain sense, in the economy of today. The other point is we need to leave the companies and the innovators the possibility to experiment. There is not one solution. Everything has several, is multifaceted. I give you the example of cotton. It's true that cotton is water intensity and fertilizer intensity, and it's a disaster. But the cotton we use in Burkina and in Mali is pluvial cotton, which is to say it's not irrigated, it's out of sustainable agriculture, integrating agriculture with the farmers and this and that. There are solutions. So we need to focus on these solutions. Viscose is chemical intensive. We wanted to transform bamboo, and we are trying to transform bamboo into fiber and this and that to use the system of viscose, but we don't want to use the chemicals. We'll use a mechanical system. The mechanical system is less productive, so it has to cope also with the economy side of that. PET, you are right. Patrik is right. The majority of the polyester that you see around today comes from PET recycling. We are also building a factory in Uganda to recycle PET, but we are going to sell it to those who make bottles because they pay more. So the thing of bringing together the economy, finance, the investment capacity of the industry into a clear framework in which the industry is forced to account for the decarbonization and material intensity of their supply chain. And here today we have a public, maybe we have many consumers. When you go into a shop and you see we contribute towards this SDG, we contribute towards the Paris Agreement on climate change, we are circular, ask to see the data and the systems through which these data are generated. Because today there is a possibility to account for it, to have a transparent accounting system to show progress towards the objective of circularity and of decarbonization. Very last point, circularity design, you're absolutely right on design. Absolutely right on design, that it starts from design. When we were at the very beginning of our work, we used to make bags for Ilaria Fendi, who had the brand, a sustainable brand, Carmina Campus in those days. It was about sustainable bags only out of recycled products. So we designed, she designed in order to make them in such a way that they use recycled products, and we could then disassemble them at the end of their product life and perfectly separate all the materials. But the materials still had problems in being recycled because some of the materials had dyes, because some of the materials had chemical inputs and all the rest. It's a moment in which we have to have clear accounting system of general objectives and then leave the industry leeway to innovate and to find solutions. But transparency and accountability is key because there's a lot of cheating around. We have to eliminate that.
So we need legislation for that, or what would you say? I mean, because actually we
legislation, absolutely. We need legislation for that, enforcement of legislation, and we need legislation is key, but we need a very focused legislation on accounting systems, objectives, and that's all. You cannot legislate on everything.
We did it without legislation.
Rob, what did you want to say?
We did it without legislation. I mean, look at what we did.
That's true. That's true. And if you want, you can do it without legislation. No, absolutely. If you are serious, you do it without.
It's about innovation. Absolutely. It's about the initiatives of the companies. And you're right. I mean, circularity, because I'm afraid that at the moment, in our industry at least, the discussion about carbon neutrality is taking over, where it's the importance, because it's just part of the holistic approach. The circularity is the most important thing. We did not get any subsidies for building this recycling factory that is working, actually. We didn't. And we did, and all the things that we do, it's not about textile, all the things that we do with resilient flooring and making it resilient, we do it ourselves. And indeed, it's difficult to get the customer to pay for it. So it also means that Tarkett is losing money, but we think this is the way forward. So, and I'm not saying that we're the only ones. I mean, but there should be more. But there are more companies that are doing this from out their own strategy perspectives and wish of innovation. I don't say we do not need legislation. I think we do, and we need other taxes. You need taxes for pollution, and you need taxes for products and materials that are not safe. But as always, the initiative is within the industry, and by sharing and more transparency, I think you will see others to follow.
But Rob, you couldn't. I mean, your products are not more expensive due to cradle to cradle. So if others would have to pay for the pollution they are producing, that would help you as well, because then your products would look good because you're not polluting with your products. So
yeah, you're right. You're right.
If polluters do not pay for pollution, we will never have a level playing field. Full stop. Then you are right. You are absolutely right. It's the innovation which comes from inside the industry. Yeah. The capacity of innovate and finding solution is there. You demonstrate this. You guys who are here today are a demonstration of this capacity. And this is why legislation, polluters to pay, and clear accounting systems to show your progress. Very simple, very straightforward. And then leave leeway to the industry. This innovation can only come from a huge collaborative effort. Otherwise,
I agree,
it's lost.
That's why we are doing legislation on the European level in the course of this year. That's what we intend, that we raise the level playing field, and the ones get rewarded which are doing more on sustainability. For example, a target for recycled content in clothing, or one fiber clothing as at least as a certain share of the collection, and these kind of things are possible. I mean, we did it with light bulbs, we did it with other products on the European level, and I think this is possible, and the will is there, because the problem is a big problem, as Simone in particular pointed out, and so that's what we need. But we need more, that's for sure, than the voluntary labeling schemes we have at the moment. That's true.
Thank you.
And there are situations, and there are situations like Patrik. Of course, Patrik, everybody, all the big brands are coming to you now. You are an incredible solution for them. You offer a product, you offer what they need. By working with you for the first time, they can say, hey, I increased my circularity rate, boom, ready. Get them to do more. Get them to source more from companies like yours. And this happens if they really have to pay, if there is a legislation, and if they are left free to innovate and to find the solutions as you have done.
Thank you, all you guys. We have a lot of questions from the audience as well, and I wanted to have some of them at least in our panel as well. So let me just make a short switch to the questions and ask you some of them. There's a particular question to Patrik. How do you prove the collected textiles? Do you have to trust the sorters that cottons, or is it machine based, or how do you prove this?
First of all, there's two ways actually. One is, if you look at textile collectors and textile sorters, we have quite a few of them throughout the world. From them, you can buy fractions. It's already kind of an ongoing system. So we can buy a fraction of, let's say, jeans. We can buy a fraction of dress shirts. We can buy a fraction of bed linen, for example. And those are very cotton rich. So we know which fraction that are cotton rich. And then what we do is that we take in those supplies, and of course we make an inbound specification check on that material. How much cotton is actually in here? And so if we have said to a supplier that, yeah, we want to have, let's say, for this price or for this batch, we want to have 96% cotton. They are trying to sell us that, and then we are testing it against it. And what's quite interesting is that type of materials are already there, available. So we can buy that in large quantities already today. And with this new legislations that Ulf was talking about, that's coming into play in Europe, where we are going to start seeing collection of waste in the same way as we do with other recyclable products. There will be even more textiles available throughout Europe. And we're hoping that this will also happen on a UN scale, so that we would see that in the US, we would see it in Asia, etc. Because when we do that, there will be a lot more raw materials. And another important point, I think, that the EU has done is they have also stipulated that the materials that are collected should not be put into landfill or being burned. We need to find ways of making them circular. So there are a lot more waste available and will be. And the sorters already have made the first attempt on how to do that. And then the last question was if this is being done manually or with machines. Today, the majority is being done manually, and therefore it's being sent to countries where you have low labor cost. In the future, what I see is also there are a lot of initiatives on making this with machines, where you actually scan a material and you can decide if that is cotton, polyester, or whatever. And we need those sorting systems to become more, let's say, sophisticated. But already today, I can buy a lot of cotton, rich waste on the market. And I see that that possibility growing even further and beyond any capacity I can build. Was that?
We can't hear the speaker anymore.
No.
Host.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Can you hear me again?
Now
So we were talking about what laws do we need, and we're talking also about business models. The next question from the audience was, is there a plan to reduce the taxation for circular business models in order to support the companies, so that we can actually go further on circular business models as well? Maybe a question to the ministry.
There's no plan for that yet. We, instead of using the tax system for companies, we are trying to set targets, and we will set targets and focus on these kinds of instruments to raise the level playing field. It's I would say, much more effective and much more to the point doing that, as you can see with the Eco Design Directive, for example, that you set certain standards, certain targets, and then the products will be designed according to that.
But on an EU level, there were ideas on maybe supporting these ideas of circular economy business models. Yeah.
Not
with the circular economy action plan.
There are, but this is more in general. Yes, there are also member states which have a target, for example, in like Finland, in the turnover of companies being active in circular economy area and so on. And there are repair services have tax advantages, for example, in Sweden, and therefore, yeah, it's a possibility to to have that set also on the European level. But it's more concrete related to a certain sector, like the repair sector, and it's not related to a branch like the textiles branch. It's more a general issue. But yes, this is under discussion. That's true.
Yeah, we were also talking about procurement, and this could make a difference if we have like public procurement in a cradle-to-cradle way. This is, for example, also something we are working with different municipalities on how they can actually work on a cradle-to-cradle procurement, because it makes a huge difference if we would have a public procurement in all fields that is actually working with good materials. But regarding to this, there was the question, is there already any database which features in textiles regarding to sustainability, circular procurement? If you could also say something about this.
Yes, there is no real data set so far, but as we have the obligation to procure 50% of sustainable textiles on the federal level, we are monitor that. The problem we face is that there are not so many sustainable textiles on the market so far. The market share of sustainable textiles is really low. Textiles with some of the recommended standards and which meet the criteria of some of the recommended standards and labels. It's increasing, yes. It's a positive trend, but it's still the market share is really low, and that's some of the problems which are reported from the procurement offices, that they don't get an offer for their tenders on sustainable textiles. So there's also a need for moving the market before we. So it's a chicken and egg situation. When we have the tenders for sustainable textiles, of course, we send a signal to the market and that more sustainable textiles are produced, but more standards, sustainability standards are taken into account. But it's not. The process is not going from one day to another that we have a huge share of textiles or sustainable textiles on the market. So this is part of the problem we face with the public procurement. But the target is set, and yes, we are working on that also on the federal level in our, for example, also in our interministerial working group on sustainable consumption. We discuss how we can get further on that.
Yeah, from the companies we get different feedback, because we get the feedback that they are having these cradle-to-cradle products, but they don't get the chance to actually put them into the procurement process that well, because actually there are not these much tenders yet that are having this in there. And I think this would be really important to have, especially the public procurement, actually taking this as one part of their job to actually send these signals and to also change the public procurement in this term.
We agree.
Yeah. Okay. We are almost at the end of our discussion. There was one more question for the end, and I would want to give this question into the round and also maybe see what your aspects are for the possibilities for the future. So the question is, how can the most commonly used blends be replaced by other more sustainable materials that have the same or similar physiological properties? And given the technologies available today, is it possible to switch to these fibers? Maybe to make this question a little bit bigger, to give it back to all of you, what would you see as the most the biggest possibility for the future to actually change our production, to change our textile sector, and what do you think we would need for this change? Yeah, maybe Rob, you would start, and then we make the round.
Yeah, okay. Of course, we are a small part of the whole textile industry with our products, and in our case, we've shown that it is possible, and we've shown that you have to start with design, you have to start with the choice of your materials, and so in our case, if the flooring industry would just follow us, then we would already be a lot further than at the moment. For the fashion industry, I'm not so familiar with that, but I see that a company like Aquafil also focuses with their innovations in recycling of fibers also into the fashion industry. So maybe the fashion industry should also look to other organizations that are also looking into innovations, and because it's all about cooperation, it's all about partnership. So maybe, because I'm hearing that there is no nylon used in the fashion industry. So, and it seems that this is the easiest fiber to recycle in a 100% safe way. So maybe also innovations from the fashion industry and using other fibers that are easier to recycle should be a solution.
Yeah, that's not totally true that there's no fashion brand using it. For example, Napajiri just launched a collection of nylon-based textiles in the fashion sector. Maybe just thank you, just to make it a little bit shorter for all of you, because the break is waiting for us. Patrik, can you make the next?
Sure. So very shortly, I think there's a lot of positive movement already here. We have, if you look at the consumers, they want circularity. They want sustainable clothes. We eat sustainably, we travel sustainably, or we want to. We also want to build sustainably. So the market is there for these type of products. The fashion industry, they want also to change. They're following, of course, the trends of the market. And one of the biggest trends that we have in the world today is sustainability. So the driver is there already. So what we need to do is we need to design for circularity. We need to create those collection systems and start, sorting out the clothes that are being circulated. But then we also need to build scale. There is a huge, I think that's the largest challenge we have in how do we actually just absorb the amount of volumes that need to be created in a sustainable way. And here I think we all need to collaborate from the governments, from environmental bodies and so forth, from the, let's say, investor side, as well as from our side, let's say, business side, to create the volumes that are needed to change or make the fashion industry sustainable. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. However, scale is the biggest challenge. Other than that, I think we're on the right path, and I'm quite optimistic that we can do this during this decade if we're really putting our minds to it and stop talking and actually doing. I find that is the most important thing when it comes to circularity. And one last thing, we also talked about it, cradle to cradle, circularity in my mind, and that is taking the molecules, don't burn them, don't put them on landfill. We need to reuse what we once have already produced.
Thank you very much. Simone, could you go next?
I agree with Rob and Patrik. There is no ready solution now, but there are examples as they are, that this is possible and this is the way to go. It's a huge push in collaboration, in technology, and as Rob rightly says, in applying also experiences from other sectors that may be available and may be used in here. I remember only one thing, that in the 50s, in central Italy, in Prato, where I was born, the wool industry became big by recycling garments from the US, by grinding them and producing new wool, consuming a lot of water. Then they realized the problem was water, and they created the circular system to use water. So we always had experiences and efforts towards circularity. We need to put them together and to create a collaborative environment with the right fiscal incentives, because putting down taxation for those who do things is absolutely important, and also with the right incentives for innovation, because innovation is not only digital innovation or artificial intelligence, but this is also key innovation for the future. We are trying to transform, I repeat, bamboo into a sustainable yarn, and we find a lot of problems because of the chemicals and this and that. This kind of small innovation, of incremental innovation, of applying experiences from other sectors, of collaboration, is what will change this industry A to Z. And those guys there on the left of my screen, Rob and Patrik, are an example that this is the way to go. Ulf, up to you to do more.
Thank you very much. Yeah, there was already the giving.
Yeah, Simone, of course we have to do more. I mean, we fight for, I don't know how many years now, decades. Yes, but in the field of textiles, you also, it's, the awareness is there, but the knowledge about the water footprint of a cotton product from a certain region, the advantages of wood-based fibers, this is not known by the people. You can ask people on the street, they don't know that. So even if there are already some textiles, some clothing out there, they are not very positively marketed, because companies are a little bit afraid that they are misunderstood when positively market textiles with a recycled content or with new fibers. So that has to be changed. So there has to be more positive marketing. And of course, we are in charge of informing the people, educate the people that there is a problem with the water footprint of some cotton products, and that there are advantages of wood-based fibers. And please, people, look at the product outline, the product path in the future, maybe of your clothing, and see where it comes from and what it is made of, and if it's can be recycled or not, and so on. This has to be a corporate action by governments, by NGOs, and also by companies, that these kind of awareness and this kind of demand is growing, and so contributing to a more sustainable textile market, sustainable textile industry.
And from universities and fashion schools, because fashion schools should start teaching this, how to make things circular, how to design for circularity, what are materials, what is the carbon footprint of materials, what is the labor, what is the water intensity. All these issues have to become part of the programs. We see a lot of young designers that come to ask for internship with us, or who work with fashion brands we work with, who don't know that. When you speak to them, they don't know the things that you mentioned. So that's also a huge issue for fashion education. Stop teaching them the rest, but teach them about that.
Thank you very much. I think this was a good end for this discussion. That's what we as Cradle to Cradle NGO also do. We are talking about this. We are having this, this conference to talk about this and to have this discussion with all of you, with people around the world. And we are now at the time where we are at our break, and we will hear a lot from our, from the spotlights and from the perspective of the Global South after the break. So there's still much more to go to talk about. And thank you guys for talking about the challenges that we are facing from your perspective, and happy to hear that there are already solutions there, and that we can make it differently. So have a good break, and see you at the break again, and have a great day.